Well, good evening, everyone. We are continuing with the subject that we have at hand, and there has been a topic that has been brought up to me. It was brought up this afternoon. It's been brought up a couple other times by a few other people, and I wanted to test the market out, so to speak. Sunday evening, we've been doing the Bible class type open forum kind of study. I want to continue with that. But I think where we might go, there's been a lot of people asking about fasting. And to be quite honest with you, I've never studied it in detail. I mean, I could tell you a lot about what I understand of fasting, but actually in the Bible and New Testament, and actually a deep dive, what it means. First off, there's some people that would say, and just to open this up for when we do this, some would say that it's in the Bible, so we have to do it. Well, I would say, just from my recommendation, from what I understand, and hopefully we'll come to that conclusion, but I think if Jesus did it, it was a good thing. But you also need to remember that Jesus wasn't just fasting. It wasn't just, I'm going to fix my body. You know, a lot of times people will fast in our society, to flush toxins out, to just get rid of a lot of the junk. And that did that for Jesus as well. But one of the things that I never really even connected it wholly, I mean, when I look at it, I see that and I talk about it, but I was talking about this with Christy the other day, and she goes, well, one of the things that people they always say, well, let's study fasting, but what about the other part of that? Jesus always fasted and prayed. So there was that bringing him closer to God at that thing. So that's just a little abbreviation. I got to put a study together because, like I said, I've never actually done a deep dive into fasting. But I thought it'd be interesting because there has been a few people that have said, hey, we never ever studied that. And it's in the Bible, so why not take a look at it? So we'll take a look at some of the questions. And you know what? Actually, with something like that we don't study very often, maybe you have a question about it. And, I don't always do this, but we can anytime. If you have a question about fasting, I'm thinking it's going to be probably 2 weeks to put this together. I want to do it right. But if you have a question, like something you're wondering about, hand me something or text me or email me or call me and say, this is something I had a question about. And that way I can maybe even try to tailor it towards the class even more. So instead of just, here's fasting and this is what it is, maybe we can open it up even more. If you guys have some questions or some thoughts or whatever it may be that pertains to that, if there's something that you're wondering about, let me know, and I will make sure we go that route and try to do that. So that'll be a subject that we're going to get into probably in 2 weeks, I would say. But let's go ahead and get back to the lesson at hand. We were looking at pride. Really, the only thing we got to do last week was we got to define it, and we looked at some of the Old Testament texts. Definition of pride is the idea here. Let me go back so I can say it the proper way here, that the dictionary had it. A high or inordinate opinion of one's own dignity, importance, merit of superiority, whether as cherished in the mind or as displayed in bearing, conduct, etc., becoming or dignified sense of what is due to oneself or one's position or character. So we talked about that. We talked kind of about, what pride was and how it affects us. We looked at some of the different words throughout the Old Testament. So now we'll take a look at some of the words here in the New Testament. And the first one to look at here, it is hyperophania. And it means pride, haughtiness, arrogance, the character of one who is with swollen estimate of his own power or merits. You find that in Mark chapter 7 and verse 22. Another one would be typhu, to make proud, puff up with pride, render insolence, to blind with pride or conceit. That one we find in 1 Timothy 3 and verse 6. There are a few other words here in the New Testament that we'll look at real quick. Another one is alazonia, A-L-A Zoneia. It just means empty, baggart talk, and insolent, empty assurance. We find that one in 1 John 2 and verse 16, and also in James 4 and verse 16, where it actually is translated boasting. So we see that. To me, it's amazing. You look at the English language and you say, all right, let's describe love. Okay, the word's love. You go to the Greek language and you're using, there's what we're looking at here, 4 or 5, 6 different words here in the Greek that can be translated. And really what it comes down to is simply, does pride come in different forms? Is there someone that may have just a little bit of pride and they just have to get rid of that little bit, and then there's that full-on someone that they don't care about anyone else, it's just all about me. And really, if you look at all of these different words, they just kind of describe the same kind of thing in different aspects or different perspectives. And it's just, I don't know, I wonder sometimes how we in the English language even get by sometimes, because it's not as, the words are not describing the way that the words are in say, the Greek language. And you wonder, did God choose this language for a reason? Was it just because the people mainly were speaking that at the time, or did God set it in place and say, hey, this is a good language where we're going to be able to translate this into other languages very easily because of the scope of the words that are described here? It's just, to me, it blows my mind. Another one, hyperaphanos, showing oneself above others, overtopping. Some passages here, Romans 1 and verse 30, 2 Timothy 3:2, James 4:6, and 1 Peter 5 and verse 5. Another word that we often use, at least we see in the scriptures as far as pride, is this puffed up. And this puffed up, even though I mentioned in some of the other words, you can kind of find that word in the definition, but this one, it's physio, P-H-Y-S-I-O, to inflate or to blow up, to cause to swell up, to bear oneself lofty. And just some of the passages here, and if you think about this for a minute, I'm going to tell you there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 verses that I reference here to this word, and all 6 of those are in 1 Corinthians. Do you remember the idea of what Paul was talking to the Corinthians about? Weren't they puffed up about something? They were celebrating an act of a son basically taking his stepmother from his father and marrying her. And so that's, if you look at that, 1 Corinthians 4:6, 4:18, 4:19, 5:2, all here we see this idea. This word is in here of being puffed up or overinflated. The last 2 that I want to look at here, Hypselo, I'm not even going to attempt to even try to figure that word out. But what it does mean is high-minded. I understand that, high-minded, someone that is, high-minded, not smarter than everybody, but it's someone that may think they are. I'm better than you because my father was so-and-so, or I'm better than you because I drive this car, or I'm better than you because I live in this community. That type of an attitude. And then the last one to talk about is typho, to make proud, puff up with pride, render insolent. And I have 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 4. Some of the things that we did last week was we talked just with some of the back and forth talking from you guys and discussion. We brought up some of these, like for instance, Adam and Eve was brought up last week, and the pride that they had in the garden. Obviously, Genesis chapter 3 and verse 5 is a great example. Satan says this to him in Genesis 3:5, "For God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." I'll tell you what, That's an enticing verse if you don't understand the context, like Adam and Eve didn't. What did God say? You're going to die, right? Did that mean they were going to bite into a poisonous apple and die right away? No. It just meant that death was going to come. But we see that, does that not, you think about someone who's prideful. They usually want to be in charge. They usually want to tell people what to do. Can you imagine someone telling you that if you do this, you'll be like God? But the only problem is they're leaving out the part that, the only thing you're going to know is right and wrong. You're not going to have all the rest, the omnipresence, the omnipotence, everything that God has. But you see that. You see the pride of life happening there in the Garden of Eden. Yes, Cindy. They didn't. Well, yeah, that's, yeah, no, I know the question you're asking. Well, I guess it would be the best way for me to make a comparison. Obviously, they must have known, and they had obviously the ability for God to say, don't eat from this tree, but you can eat from all these other trees. Now, for them to really, really understand the consequences of it, I think that's what comes into play there. More or less kind of like a baby who does something, but, I don't know, that's probably too far because an adult isn't thinking that way. But it's the idea, I think, of the separation of God, too. When you know right from wrong, you know you can be separated from God. So I think that can play a part in that, too. But he's spinning it off like you're going to have all of this knowledge. That's all. It just really, it's an empty statement. It really means nothing. And it's just, he's, telling them, you're going to be like God. Okay, well, we were created in his image. We're already kind of there, right? Right? Yeah. Yeah. The difference between that scripture, when they took the fruit and when they didn't, what really changed? I think that's a tough question to answer because we don't know exactly how they were. But I think where Brent laid down the line of talking about a child and parents, when you were a kid, you probably did something wrong once, right? One thing, right? Never more than one. But, and if anyone turns around and sees Bob shaking his head, just ignore it because we know he was just telling us he was the worst out of the four. Or that was his words, not mine. But anyhow, we see this idea. We all sin and we all fall short. And, there are things that your parents probably told you not to do and you said, oh, well, I'll be okay. And you did it anyways. And I think that is more or less the mentality of the difference. It was the fact that, they didn't understand that there was right and wrong. They knew God was who he was. They knew God created them. They knew God was all-powerful. But then Satan comes in and he says, hey, do you want to be like him? Eat this. He just doesn't want you to be like him. All right. Any other questions, comments? They walked with him. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that plays the part of the parent and the child too. We can know our children very, very well, and they can still go out and do something against what we would teach them. And they may, and in a lot of cases, that we probably knew better when we did those things, even though we just, so, but yeah, so the pride is something we got to be very, very careful with. Samson was another guy that was very prideful. He really didn't have the reason to be because he just really didn't. I don't know. It seems like Samson just kind of always acted like a kid. To me, that it seems like it was his mentality that he, just gonna kind of do whatever I want to do. and go everywhere I want to go. But anyhow, we remember in Judges 15, and this is the scene where he takes the jawbone of the lamb and or ram, and he slaughters like 1,500 people, I believe it was. But it's his pride that gets him into these positions. It was his pride when he finally tells Delilah where his strength came from. Well, why did he do that? Did he trust her, or did he just have enough pride in himself that he thought it didn't matter if I told her, I'm still going to be able to do whatever I came here to do? We have lots of other examples in the Scriptures. Another great example, obviously, to bring up is the parable that Jesus taught in Luke chapter 18, 9 through 14. The publican, and the Pharisee, the tax collector and the Pharisee. And, we know the story. The Pharisee's in front of everybody, and he's, look how good I am. Thank you for blessing me. Thank you for making me who I am, and not like this tax collector who is a sinner. And the tax collector's going off in a humble attitude and falling down before the Lord, and not to make a spectacle or to show that he is anything. And that was probably one of the biggest problems with the Pharisees. And the biggest problems in this world is probably us and pride. Pride gets in the way of so much stuff. And we do not want to let pride get in the way of us serving God. So let's take a look at a couple of other things here. Well, first off, how do we overcome pride? What would you say? I mean, what are some things that you think somebody can do to overcome pride? Practice being humble, giving to others, helping others, going out of your way for others. Well, what about looking at our own life in the light of God's Word? We've talked in here before. We've talked in our Bible classes where we know that sometimes we're not our best judge, because we deceive ourselves so much. So we need to pick up God's Word, but we need to be open to the Word. We cannot go to the Word and say, well, God, I know I'm supposed to read, but I'm already perfect. So I don't need to take any more in, but I'll just read because I'm supposed to. It's the same thing with this morning, with our hearts and God knowing it. Yeah. Absolutely. You're doing something wrong if it isn't. Absolutely. Yeah. Thinking of God, thinking of His Word, thinking of what Christ's sacrifice was. Oh, yeah. Sure. Sometimes, and it's not necessarily someone humiliating you on purpose, but because of your pride, you put yourself in that position to be humiliated. Yeah, sometimes it takes an emotional ride to realize that you have an issue. Now take a look, listen to this, Luke 17, verse 10. Luke 17:10 says, so likewise you, when you have done all those things which you are commanded, say, we are unprofitable servants. We have done what was our duty to do. I don't know about you, but that seems like a humbling verse right there. We have done everything we were supposed to do, but in a sense, we're still unprofitable. And that's because we can't do it without God. We need to realize and focus on, and not in a prideful way, but we need to realize that we're the highest form of God's creation here on the earth. God gave us, He had Adam name the animals. He had, we were created in His image, Genesis 1, 26 through 27. But the emphasis is not the higher part, but the emphasis really, I think, is on creation, that God created us. What better passage to think about than Job chapter 38 through 41? I don't know if the book's too long or what, but it seems like people get stuck in the beginning when he's going through all the sicknesses and maybe the arguments with his friends, and then now he's better. And then it seems like we sometimes skip all the way to the end of the book, and it says, well, he lived, 7 more generations, I think, and was flourished and all that. But I think the most important part of the book of Job is in these verses, 38 through 41. You see a conversation with God and a man here on this earth. And it's really a conversation to put Job in his place. And God doesn't come to him and talk all high and mighty over him. He could, he deserves to. He is higher and mightier. But he comes to him and he just starts asking him simple questions. Think about how short our life is. I mean, it really is short. Even in the book of Job, we see that. We see, we're just for a little while and we're in trouble. But in Job 38 through 41, one of the things that I really like was when he starts asking him questions about creation. He says, where were you when I laid the 4 corners? Where were you? And I don't remember all the details in there of what he asked and what. But it was basically all of the sorrow that Job had on himself earlier. And Job was we see Job's an upright person. He does continue to serve God. The only emphasis that I see in the scriptures with Job is when it says in the beginning that Job did not sin with his mouth. And to me, I've always taken that as there's a lot of turmoil going on in his mind. He's fighting things, and maybe he's thinking things that he shouldn't at times because of what he's going through. But then you fast forward to the end. He's through all these problems, and he sat there. And can you imagine going from his buddies who really had no idea what they were talking about? I'm not kidding. They really had no idea. They were stuck on this idea that even Jesus had to work on his disciples about. Hey, Jesus, who sinned, this man or his parents? So they were stuck on that only bad things going to happen to those that are sinners. And I wonder if Job maybe started to wonder if that was it. Maybe I did do something wrong. Maybe I did sin. Maybe I did fall short. But then he gets that awesome opportunity to talk to God. And not only that, God talks about some scientific things. Talks about the water table and how that works and some other things. And he explains to Job that really our life is so short. How can we even have the opportunity to say something when we don't even understand all the way back there at the beginning? I mean, to me, it really is. I mean, I encourage you, if you have some time, read the whole book. But honestly, take some time and go look at these chapters here. And really think about, because you know the story of Job. You know what he went through. And really, it's almost like his friends thought he was being proud, right? Thought he was full of pride. Just admit it. Even his wife, just, give up. Just curse God and die. Yeah, Pat. Sure.
Takes pride in what he can create, what he can do, and I really don't think somebody has anything wrong with that. And that's pride too. There's a different kind of pride.
That's okay. No, go ahead. Yep. I think that was a good answer there, actually. Absolutely. That idea is, that workman, that whatever he's working on, metal, whatever, building a car, building something out of wood, it comes down to what she was saying there. It's your mindset. If it's look at all that I do, kind of like King Nebuchadnezzar, then that's when we're going to that boastful pride where we're like, now, if you do something that's an awesome job on something, and you say, this is awesome, I'm so glad I have the ability to do this. That's a completely different thing than going, what's that? Yeah, and I was thinking about that. I was thinking about that earlier today. The difference, I was trying to count what the difference between someone who's proud, because you're proud of your children, you're proud of lots of things, but pride is not the same thing as being proud of somebody else. I guess it comes down to the individual. Being prideful is self-centeredness. It's all about me. And when you're proud of somebody else, I guess, that's more like you're seeing what they're doing. Brent, and then yeah. Yeah. All the word, yeah. Eric? Yeah. Or in a sense, they did it for him. That was why they did the work. Right. 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 Right, and the credit goes to God for giving you the ability to retain the knowledge, to learn those things, and yeah, that's what it comes down to. I think really pride becomes sin when we go down the selfish road, when it's this is look at who I am, or this is what I can do, and now I don't think there's anything wrong with having it confidence in saying I can do something though. That's not pride. I mean, I guess the example is David and Goliath. Saul wanted to give him his armor and everything. Wanted to give him his sword and all that stuff. And David just wanted to take some stones and a sling. He had confidence that he was going to slay that giant. But there wasn't one time that David ever went up to his brothers and said, look how powerful I am. I'm going to do it. The first comment he made was about God when he went out to the Philistines. First comment he made to his brothers and the king was, why are we letting him degrade our God? So it really comes down to a mindset. I mean, yeah, we should be proud of the church. We should be proud of our children. We should be proud of our families. But it's when we lose sight of it and really we put that pride in ourselves. That's when the problem happens. And like I said, we don't want to take away from the fact that there's nothing wrong with being happy about something or accomplishing something. That's not, and there's not even anything wrong with telling people you accomplished something. It's how and why. You know, are you looking for that pat on the back? Or are you just excited about something you did and you want to show people that you can do it? And I think the attitude plays a big part in all of that. All right. Yes, Leslie. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Well, we get into the mindset with our pride that we know everything. You know, Ray and I were joking before class about Liam and being 6.5 years old and thinking he knows everything. And Ray said, well, wait till he's 16. And I said, yeah, I know. It's not going to get any better. But, you know, it's when we come down to pride that we realize, you know, if we listen closer to God's word, if we meditate more in prayer, if we take constructive criticism. Anyone like being criticized? I don't like criticism. I don't even like constructive criticism sometimes. But I'll tell you what, 10 times out of 10, if you listen to the constructive criticism later on, you're going to be happy someone told you. It's just that idea that you don't want someone to tell you you're falling short or you're not good enough or you need to improve or whatever it is, no matter how nice they put it. And, you know, we see one of the last things I want to share here is we need to listen and learn from others, but measure their words by God's words. What kind of life would we have if we did everything that everyone else told us to do? Your friends are jumping off the bridge. You going to follow them? You know, or whatever rendition of that you used on your children at some point. I'm sure we've all said that in some way. But yeah, you know, we can learn from rebukes and from correction and from criticism and from others. But we need to be open-minded enough to be able to say, I need to improve. There's something I can do better. There's a better way of doing this. And that's, I think, one of the biggest problems with pride is when someone is full of pride, sometimes it's hard to even get them to realize that they are. Or they just don't want to pay attention to the fact of what they're doing. Well, you know, we look at a couple of different things here this evening. First off, you know, how to overcome pride. We look at our own life in the light of the Word of God. We think about who we are. You know, we may be just little people here on this earth, but we're God's creation. And that, you know, should give us, I'm going to use the word pride. We should be proud of the fact that we are God's people. But we need to remember and use that and realize, you know, where were you when I placed the stars? Where were you when I laid the four corners? I mean, those were all things that God was just trying to get Job to realize. You did good, but there's some improvement that you can do. And I think we all can look at it that way. Right? stones. Right. Yeah, and that, that, what you were talking about with the water and the stones and things, that should prove to us that we shouldn't take things at face value. Sometimes we look at something and say it can't be done. And it should. Now, that may be the opposite there of pride, but, we need to realize that we need to be confident in the Lord, that He's going to get us through. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. We'll offer invitation. I don't know if I get enough material put together this week for the fasting thing, then we'll start that next week. If not, I'll just pick some little thing we'll do next week, and then we'll get started with looking at that. And like I said, remember, if you have any questions or anything that you're wondering about, that maybe we can pursue that topic in that direction, hand me a note, send me a text, give me a call, an email, whatever, and I will apply those to the studies that we have. But here, as we offer the invitation for anyone here that has any need, whether to be baptized into Christ or to come back to rededicate your life, if you're here this evening and you have any need, please come forward as we stand and sing.